All right, sounds good.
Everything right, let's go. As is with all elections, only a small number of seats will decide if Dan Andrews wins a third term. We have a divided state, the removal of Victorians' rights and freedoms, corruption, and Victoria Police use as attack dogs remains a scarring memory for many Victorians. And with the November election, hinges on 20 seats, according to Labor, with the remaining 68 a foregone conclusion or simply unwinnable. The Informer's political advisor, Anka Sahin, all the way from Bulgaria today, says that the 20 targeted seats that do matter, it's going to be anything goes. Welcome, Anka. Now, do you believe that these 20 seats that hold the key to victory for Andrews, or is it greater? And have the past 2 years, do you think, of what has been a dictatorial rule under Andrews done enough to sway Victorians to actually oust him and his government?
Look, I think there will be different perspectives on that, Michael, between what the ALP and their surveys and projections tell them, and what will actually happen on the ground as we get closer to the elections in November. I'm expecting that it will be a lot more close fought than originally predicted. You'll remember that only a couple of months ago, the media and various pollsters were saying that it was going to be basically another walkover for the ALP in November. I mean, that's when we were 8-9 months out from the elections, they were already declaring victory for the current ruling government. And I always thought that was a bit premature, given all the baggage that we carry as Victorians, starting from 2020 well into the end of 2021 and even this year, 2022. There are a lot of issues there that are still unresolved. The repercussions of the way the state government in particular decided to handle the pandemic response has left lasting damages for many of us living permanently in Victoria. And when people go to the polls in November, all of that will certainly be playing in the back of their minds.
Now, the arrogance of the party is such that they actually say that they've learned from the 2010 election and you can't be nice to everyone. I think that's true, because the alternative seems to be an ineffective opposition that isn't really helping themselves at the moment.
No, that's right. The ineffectiveness of the opposition, and of course the recent corruption scandals or nepotism scandals that have popped up there on that side, when they have been pointing the finger to the ALP on exactly the same issue for the last 2.5 years, with good obviously with good grounds, of course, but for them to be engaging in a similar behavior themselves, it just isn't helping their image with the public at the moment. And when it comes to discussing things like, well, have they learned from 2010 when they spread their resources too thin and ended up losing what many at the time considered an unlosable election? Well, look, things are very, very different. I think it's unhelpful to try and compare the circumstances, particularly of this election in 2022 in Victoria, much more so than any other state or territory in Australia. I think it will be very unique in terms of what the people, the voters in Victoria, will consider when they go to cast their votes. And yes, the ALP at the moment has an 11 seat buffer in Parliament, and the opposition doesn't really look organized enough and coherent enough and convincing enough to be able to get the additional 18 seats that they would need to unseat them from government. Having said that, we have recently seen the establishment and rise of the Victorians Party, and we have also seen, especially in the outer suburbs, swings against Labor in Victoria, where the government does enjoy an 11 seat buffer. Some of the biggest consider going forward. If they think that it's going to be another election in the bag, then I think that they might find themselves disappointed.
We saw the Greens gain some ground, and the Teals did well in the federal election. A Teal type candidate doesn't have a lot to offer in the state with what the state controls. Do you think small independents, or as you say, the newly formed Victorians Party, will play a significant role, or will they just be a distraction?
Oh, I expect them to play a much bigger role than we have seen the Teals play at the federal level, for instance. Yes, the Teal type independent movement may not necessarily, or semi-independent movement may not necessarily translate into the same level of success that we've seen at federal level when we look at Victoria. But the Victorians Party in particular, I think is, and they have already said that they are planning to run candidates for every single seat in the lower house, all 88 seats. And I think that's significant. And the reason why that's significant is, well, firstly, we've mentioned the swings against Labor, particularly in the outer suburban seats. And those are seats that have, for instance, in the previous state elections in 2018, we saw an independent, Oscar Yildiz, who is one of the founders of the Victorians Party, come very close to taking the seat of Pascoe Vale, which has been considered a safe seat for the ALP for decades, basically. And he came very close. I think ultimately for a safe seat, it ended up being something like 42 to 58 on two candidate preferred basis. And that's quite significant given that he came from nowhere to get that sort of a vote in Pascoe Vale. And that's just an indication that, some of those seats, even where those seats have previously been considered safe for Labor, where there is resentment on the part of the populace as a result of the heavy-handed approach to the pandemic by the state government over the last two and a half years, that could easily translate into, and especially when they find themselves reluctant to vote for an opposition candidate, if a viable candidate emerges from a third party like the Victorians Party, or even some other party that we have seen make inroads in federal elections, like the Liberal Democrats, for example. And of course, we've seen One Nation is not much of a factor in Victoria. But look, people will be people who are disappointed with the current government and who cannot bring themselves to vote for the opposition either, for reasons we have touched upon just before, will be looking for alternatives. And if those alternatives present themselves and make their case, I would expect them to certainly create waves in the November elections.
Yes, the Victorians Party definitely an interesting spectacle to behold, especially as a party, a newly formed party that could well take off this time. If not, they will definitely be a force to be reckoned with in the future should they do well. Now, with the integrity issues, which is both parties throwing punches at each other, is this a nuclear option? Do you think they're doing as much harm to themselves by pointing out, are they adding hypocrisy on top of integrity problems?
Well, it certainly would seem that way. Just as they come out punching the opposition for something that they have been caught doing, only a couple of weeks passes, and before you know it, the party that is throwing the punches is caught doing the same thing or worse themselves, and that obviously doesn't really speak to their integrity. So I think people are increasingly seeing through the political point scoring that claims of integrity or lack thereof have turned into in the Victorian political landscape.
Mm. Well, all right, Anka, I'll let you get back to the sun in Bulgaria. Thanks for your time, and we'll see you next week.
No worries, Michael. All the best, and yeah, I look forward to catching up again. Cheers.